The signal pulsed with an alien rhythm, a language woven from prime numbers and gravitational waves. It wasn't meant for human ears, or any ears at all, but Senior Tech Officer John Jackson heard it anyway. Designed to bypass conventional detection methods, the signal was intended only for a specific type of receiver, one likely residing far beyond the Milky Way. John Jackson wasn't supposed to hear anything but the humdrum of cosmic background radiation and the occasional, predictable blips of human-made satellites. Stationed at the Argus Array, a remote, underfunded deep space listening post clinging to the fringes of explored space, his primary duty was monitoring for routine communications distress calls from struggling freighters, bureaucratic reports from distant colonies, the kind of static that made up the white noise of human expansion. His days were monotonous. Sifting through static, filing bureaucratic reports, and battling the persistent hum of the aging equipment, the Argus Array wasn't exactly a hub of excitement. Most days, John felt like a forgotten cog in a vast, indifferent machine. He secretly believed he was capable of more, of contributing something meaningful to the galaxy, but his superiors saw him as a reliable, if uninspired, technician good for keeping the lights on, but not much else. Then, an unexpected burst of energy registered on a rarely used and almost forgotten sensor array, Array 7, affectionately nicknamed Grandpa, due to its age and tendency to malfunction. The energy burst wasn't just a blip. It contained a structured signal, defying all known natural phenomena and eclipsing every human communication protocol in complexity. Alarms blinked red across his console, alarms that hadn't seen use in years. Initial analysis revealed the signal's structure exceeded anything humanity had previously encountered. The waveform danced across his monitor, a chaotic yet elegant tapestry woven from frequencies and amplitudes that seemed to bend the very laws of physics. Its origin was clearly non-human, its design hinting at an intelligence far beyond our own. But further investigation revealed something even more intriguing. The signal was degrading. Its strength was diminishing, its structure becoming increasingly fragmented. Whatever was generating the signal was in distress or experiencing some type of catastrophic event. A cold knot formed in John's stomach. This wasn't just an anomaly, it was a cry for help. Regulations strictly prohibited tampering with unknown signals. The potential consequences were too great, the risks too unpredictable. But as John stared at the fading waveform, a sense of urgency washed over him. He couldn't just ignore it, not this time. Despite the potential repercussions, John decided to dedicate his off-duty hours to deciphering the message. He bypassed security protocols, rerouted power from non-essential systems, and coaxed the aging computers to perform calculations they weren't designed for. Fueled by lukewarm coffee and a burning curiosity, he worked tirelessly, driven by a nagging feeling that something extraordinary was at stake. Days blurred into nights as he wrestled with the alien code. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he isolated a repeating sequence within the signal, a series of complex mathematical equations that seemed to function as a location marker. He cross-referenced the sequence with star charts, astronomical databases, and every other resource at his disposal. The results were startling. The sequence pointed to a distant, uncharted region of the Andromeda Galaxy, a place where no human had ever ventured. What was out there in the uncharted depths of the Andromeda Galaxy, and why was it calling out to him? What was out there in the uncharted depths of the Andromeda Galaxy, and why was it calling out to him? The question hung in the stale, recycled air of the listening post, unanswered for only a heartbeat. John's fingers danced across the console, inputting commands with practiced ease. The alien signal, a chaotic symphony of static and structured data, will-powered into a single, pulsing point on the star chart. A system on the fringes of the Andromeda Galaxy, impossibly distant. "All right," he muttered, the hum of the ancient equipment his only company. "Let's see if anyone's listening." He initiated a return signal, selecting the listening post's primary transmitter. A low thrum filled the room, building to a whine, then abruptly dying with a protesting groan. Warning lights flickered across the control panel. "Damn it," John hissed, slamming a fist on the console. Not now. The transmitter, a relic from a bygone era of deep space exploration, was notoriously temperamental. Maintenance requests had been filed and ignored for years. Scowling, John grabbed a battered toolkit and a stack of outdated manuals, diving into the guts of the machine. Wires sparked, circuits sputtered, and the air filled with the acrid smell of ozone. He bypassed faulty relays, rerouted power conduits, and coaxed the ancient technology back to life with a mixture of ingenuity and sheer force of will. Finally, with a triumphant grunt, he re-engaged the transmitter. A weak, flickering beam of energy pulsed out into the void, a desperate whisper against the cosmic roar. Unlikely to reach its intended recipient, but it was something. Returning to the console, John Ray analyzed the degrading signal pattern. As it looped, he noticed something he'd missed before: a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in frequency. He ran the data through several filters, confirming his suspicion. The frequency was changing and not randomly. Wait a minute. He leaned closer, eyes glued to the screen. The shift indicated movement, a trajectory. And the source wasn't just moving, it was accelerating, rapidly approaching their location. A chill ran down his spine. The signal wasn't just a distress beacon, it was a navigation marker, guiding something or someone directly to them. He checked the timestamp on the signal. Projecting its course and velocity, he calculated an estimated arrival time, less than 3 hours. 3 hours to prepare for. What? He didn't know. John ran diagnostics on the listening post's defensive systems, a formality really. He already knew what he'd find: outdated laser batteries, corroded missile launchers, and a patchwork shield generator that probably wouldn't stop a rogue asteroid, let alone an alien warship. Grimly, he activated the station's comm system, patching through to Sector Command. "This is Senior Tech Officer Jackson at Listening Post Delta 7. I've detected an unidentified object approaching our location at high velocity. I believe it may be the source of the anomalous signal I reported earlier." A dry, disembodied voice crackled back. "Jackson, this is Command. We've reviewed your report. The signal is likely a solar flare or some other natural phenomenon. Stand down and resume standard operations." "But sir," John protested, "the object is on a direct intercept course. We need to prepare for—" "That is an order, Jackson. Delta 7 is a listening post, not a combat station. We can't spare the resources to investigate every cosmic hiccup. Command out." The line went dead. John stared at the console, his teeth clenched. They weren't going to help. He was on his own. Undeterred, he activated the station's internal alarm system, setting it to silent mode. No need to panic the automated systems just yet. He gathered emergency rations, sealed off vulnerable sections of the station, and reinforced the blast doors with whatever materials he could find. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. He returned to the signal analysis, poring over the complex waveform, searching for any clue about the approaching object. He magnified sections of the signal, enhancing the resolution until patterns began to emerge. He noticed traces of exotic particles, elements he'd only read about in theoretical physics textbooks. They hinted at advanced propulsion systems, or perhaps some form of shielding technology far beyond human capabilities. Then, the sensors picked it up. A blip on the long-range scanners, initially dismissed as background radiation, will-powered into a distinct object entering their solar system at an impossible velocity. The computer identified it, a small escape pod, heavily damaged, its life support systems failing, and it was emitting the same signal John had been tracking. Alarms blared throughout the listening post, finally overriding the silent mode. Red lights flashed, bathing the control room in an ominous glow. The escape pod was hurtling towards their location, a wounded bird plummeting from the stars. John took a deep breath, steeling himself. He was just a tech officer, stuck on a forgotten listening post at the edge of nowhere. But he was also the only one who could offer assistance. He had to be ready. He had to be. The klaxons blared, a discordant symphony of impending doom that drowned out the hum of the deep space array. Red lights strobed across John's console, painting his face in alternating shades of panic and adrenaline. The floor vibrated violently. Impact imminent. Brace for impact. A digitized voice shrieked from the station's comm system, a warning that was already far too late. The escape pod slammed into the desolate landscape just beyond the listening post, the force of the impact shuddering through the station's foundations. Structural damage reports flooded John's screen, compromised hull integrity, power outages in sectors 3 and 4, and a cascade of error messages he didn't have time to decipher. Adrenaline coursing through his veins, John scrambled out of his chair and raced towards the emergency exit, navigating the dimly lit corridors with practiced ease. Debris littered the floor, shattered panels, sparking wires and twisted metal. The air hung thick with the acrid smell of ozone and burning plastic. He reached the exterior hatch and wrestled it open, the emergency release groaning in protest. Outside, the scene was even more chaotic. Smoke billowed from the impact crater, obscuring the mangled remains of the escape pod. The air crackled with static electricity. Ignoring the hazardous conditions, John sprinted towards the wreckage, his boots crunching on the frozen ground. The pod's hatch was sealed, fused shut by the force of the impact. He ran his hands over the smooth, alien metal, searching for a manual release. Nothing. "Damn it," he muttered, his breath clouding in the frigid air. He pulled out his multi-tool, a battered piece of equipment he'd salvaged from a derelict freighter years ago, and began to work. The tool whined as he forced it into the hatch's emergency access panel, sparks flying as he bypassed the damaged locking mechanism. After several agonizing minutes, the hatch hissed open with a rush of escaping atmosphere. Inside, the scene was grim. Lita lay slumped in her acceleration couch, her body contorted at an unnatural angle. Her skin, a pale lavender hue, was marred by cuts and bruises. A thin stream of iridescent fluid trickled from a gash on her forehead. She was unconscious, her breathing shallow and ragged. "Lita?" John called out, his voice infused with concern. There was no response. He reached out and gently shook her shoulder. Still nothing. He quickly assessed her injuries, his years of training kicking in. A possible concussion, a fractured arm, and multiple lacerations. He carefully unbuckled her from the couch and lifted her out of the pod, wincing at the unnatural flexibility of her limbs. Her body felt strangely light, almost fragile. Supporting her weight, John stumbled back towards the listening post, the harsh wind biting at his exposed skin. Lita's head lolled against his shoulder, her alien hair brushing against his cheek. He struggled to maintain his grip, his muscles burning with exertion. The infirmary seemed miles away. He finally reached the relative safety of the listening post and collapsed onto a medical cot in the cramped infirmary, gently laying Lita down beside him. The room was sparsely equipped, a few outdated diagnostic tools, a meager supply of bandages, and a med kit that had probably expired years ago. John worked quickly, cleaning her wounds and applying pressure to the bleeding. He checked her vital signs, his brow furrowing with concern. Her pulse was weak, her breathing erratic. He needed to stabilize her, but he lacked the advanced medical technology she clearly required. "Come on, stay with me," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. He tried to communicate with her, but she remained unresponsive, her eyes closed, her face pale and still. He didn't even know what language she spoke. His gaze fell upon a complex device integrated into her suit, a series of glowing tubes and intricate circuits that hummed with a faint energy. He recognized it as some kind of life support system, far more advanced than anything he'd ever seen. But it was damaged, critically so. Several of the tubes were cracked, and the circuits were sparking intermittently. He ran his hand over the device, his fingers tracing the alien symbols etched into its surface. He had no idea what it did, but he knew it was essential to her survival. Studying the schematics etched onto the device, John realized that Lita's species required technology to augment what he could only assume was a specific organ. His best guess was that the device was in fact an artificial organ that provided her with some sort of required element. He stared at the damaged circuits, his mind racing. He needed to find a way to repair it, or at least keep it running long enough to get her help. But how? He had no spare parts, no schematics, and no understanding of Andromedan technology. Then he remembered something. A high-capacity power cell he'd salvaged from a downed drone during the last meteor shower. It wasn't designed for this, but it might provide the necessary power to keep the device running, at least temporarily. He rummaged through his toolbox, his hands trembling with anticipation. He found the power cell and carefully examined it, his mind already working on a way to connect it to the alien device. It was a long shot, but it was the only chance he had. With painstaking care, John began to reroute the power cell's output, bypassing the damaged circuits and connecting it directly to the device's core power input. Sparks flew as he worked, the air filled with the smell of ozone. He held his breath, praying that he wouldn't fry the entire system. Finally, he connected the last wire. The device hummed to life, the glowing tubes pulsing with a renewed energy. Lita's vital signs flickered, then stabilized. Her breathing became deeper, more regular. A moment later, her eyes fluttered open. She blinked, her gaze unfocused. "Where am I?" she whispered, her voice weak and raspy. "You're safe," John replied, his voice filled with relief. "You're at a human listening post." She looked at him, her eyes widening with recognition. "The signal, you received it," John nodded. "Yes, we're here to help." Lita winced, clutching her chest. "They're coming," she gasped. "The Andromedan faction. They want my technology. It's too dangerous in their hands." Before John could ask any further questions, Lita's eyes rolled back in her head, and she fell unconscious once more. The weight of her warning settled heavily on John's shoulders. He had to protect her, and he had to understand her technology. The fate of not just Lita, but perhaps the entire galaxy, might depend on it. Suddenly, the listening post's long-range sensors blared to life, their alarms piercing the silence. Multiple unidentified vessels were approaching their solar system, their trajectory clear. They were heading straight for them. John's blood ran cold. The hostile Andromedan faction had arrived, and they were running out of time. Damn it. John pounded his fist on the console, the ancient metal groaning in protest. He stabbed at the comm panel again, the same static hissing back at him. Still nothing. Starfleet Command remained stubbornly silent. The escape pod's crash had fried more than just a few circuits. It had severed their lifeline. He glanced at the chrono. Every second wasted was a second the approaching vessels gained. He ripped a panel off the wall, revealing a tangle of wires. "Gotta reroute power," he muttered, his fingers dancing across the connections. "Bolster those shields, even if it means the lights go out." He bypassed the environmental controls and life support in the non-essential sectors, diverting every spare watt to the listening post's aging shield generator. The lights flickered, dimmed, but held. Lita stirred behind him, groaning softly. She pushed herself up, her brow furrowed in pain. "They're coming, aren't they?" John turned, his expression grim. "Yeah, fast. Any idea who we're dealing with?" "The Krell," she said, her voice tight with fear. "They are ruthless. They will not stop." "Ruthless how?" Lita's gaze hardened. "They enjoy suffering. They see weakness as an invitation, and they will retrieve my research, regardless of the cost." John turned back to the main view screen, analyzing the sensor readings. The approaching vessels were no mere patrol ships. They were warships, heavily armed and shielded, their energy signatures dwarfing anything the listening post could withstand. "They're bringing the heavy hitters," he said grimly. He moved to the armory, the door hissing open with a groan. Inside, rows of outdated energy rifles hung on the wall. Beside them were a few crates of ammunition. "Well, this is just great," he said, picking up one of the rifles. It felt heavy and unwieldy in his hands. "Outdated weapons, limited ammo. We're screwed." He tossed the rifle back onto the rack and turned, his mind racing. They might be outgunned, but they weren't out of options. "We need to set up defensive perimeters," he said, his voice gaining a newfound confidence. "Use the terrain to our advantage." He accessed the station's schematics, studying the surrounding landscape. A narrow canyon offered a natural choke point, and a cluster of rock formations could provide cover. "Automated turrets in the canyon," he said, pointing to the screen. "Mines in the approach corridors. It won't stop them, but it might slow them down." Lita moved to the station's central computer terminal, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "I need to access tactical data," she said, "see their flight patterns, their weaknesses." But when she tried to interface her technology with the system, sparks flew. "Incompatible," she said, frustration lacing her voice. "Your systems, they are so primitive." John examined the interface, noting the basic logic gates and the familiar data streams. "Primitive maybe, but functional," he said, "and surprisingly similar to some Andromedan interface designs." He began rerouting circuits, adapting the human system to accommodate Lita's technology. "Try this," he said, stepping back. Lita tried again. This time the interface flickered, then stabilized. Data streamed across the screen. "I'm in," she said, relief evident in her voice. "They are searching for a specific technology, related to weaponizing black holes." John's blood ran cold. "Weaponizing black holes? What the hell are they planning?" Lita shook her head. "The Krell. They believe black holes are the ultimate weapon, unstoppable. They want to control them, to unleash them on their enemies." "And you have the key to stopping them?" John asked. "I did," Lita confirmed, "but I hid the data deep within my suit. It requires a secure access code. One that I do not remember." John swore under his breath. He looked at the sensors. "They're entering the solar system, scanning for your energy signature." He knew what that meant. They were osing in, fast. He looked around the listening post, at the outdated equipment, the limited defenses, the sheer hopelessness of their situation. This was it, a desperate last stand. He turned to Lita, his eyes filled with an unbreakable spirit. "We're in this together." Suddenly, alarms blared, bathing the room in a harsh red light. The console flashed a warning. "Incoming fire." The listening post shuddered violently as the shields took a direct hit. The listening post's shields buckled, the whine of their failing energy field spiking into a tortured shriek that drowned out all other alarms for a heart-stopping second. Then came the cascade, lights flickering erratically, gravity stuttering like a skipping record, and the acrid tang of ozone flooding the cramped control room. "Lita, focus on that data storage device." John barked, his voice tight but firm, already moving towards the weapons locker. "I'll handle the welcoming committee." He grabbed a pulse rifle, the weapon feeling cold and unfamiliar in his suddenly sweaty hands. The automated turrets, usually reliable, sputtered and coughed, their targeting systems locking and unlocking erratically. John cursed. He knew these systems intimately. He'd practically grown up tinkering with them. He dove into the maintenance console, fingers flying across the interface, bypassing safety protocols and recalibrating the targeting matrix to focus on the Krell weapon signatures he'd analyzed earlier. He prioritized the disruptor cannons. Take those out, and they might just buy themselves some time. A series of metallic thuds echoed through the station as the Krell deployed boarding pods, bypassing the damaged shields entirely. Red lights pulsed urgently, painting the narrow corridors in a hellish glow. Boarding pods detected, multiple breaches imminent, the station's automated voice announced with chilling calm. John hefted the pulse rifle, its weight a grim reminder of the fight to come. He switched the setting to full auto, the weapon humming in anticipation. "Time to earn my paycheck," he muttered, bracing himself against the bulkhead. Lita, her brow furrowed in concentration, tapped furiously at the access panel of the data storage device. Lines of alien script scrolled across the screen, mocking her efforts. "It's still locked, John. The access codes aren't working." Her voice was strained, permeated with desperation. The first wave of Krell warriors poured into the corridor, their chitinous armor gleaming under the flickering lights. John opened fire, the pulse rifle spitting bolts of searing energy. The narrow confines of the corridor turned into a kill zone, the air thick with the stench of burnt alien flesh. He moved with a desperate grace, using the station's layout to his advantage, firing in controlled bursts and ducking behind cover as the Krell returned fire. He managed to repel the first wave, but not without cost. A searing pain ripped through his left arm as a disruptor blast grazed his flesh. He gritted his teeth, ignoring the burning sensation, and slapped a makeshift bandage onto the wound. Adrenaline masked the pain, but he knew it wouldn't last. "John, I think I know why the access codes aren't working," Lita called out, her voice trembling slightly. "It requires a biometric scan from a living member of my direct family line." The words hung in the air, heavy with despair. John stared at her, his palms sweating. Her family was dead, wiped out in the war. How could this be? Before he could respond, the station shuddered violently as a second wave of boarding pods slammed into the hull. The automated defenses were overwhelmed, their effectiveness crippled by the Krell assault. The red lights pulsed faster, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to mock their predicament. John realized the turrets were firing blind, their targeting systems completely haywire. "They're jamming the signal," he yelled, his voice barely audible over the din of battle. "I need to recalibrate the targeting matrix manually." He knew it was a long shot, but it was their only chance. He ripped open a nearby maintenance panel, exposing a tangle of wires and circuits. Using salvaged components from a discarded comms unit, he began to jury-rig a counter-jamming device, his fingers moving with frantic speed. He was no engineer, but he understood the basic principles, and he was running out of options. Lita, her face pale with desperation, suddenly gasped, "Wait. There's something else. When I was a child, my mother used to sing me a lullaby. Maybe it's not just an access code, but an access key." With trembling fingers, she began inputting variations of the lullaby's melody into the data storage device, her voice a soft, haunting counterpoint to the cacophony of battle raging outside. John managed to complete the counter-jamming device, a crude but functional piece of technology held together with duct tape and sheer willpower. He activated it, and a surge of energy coursed through the station's systems. The automated turrets roared back to life, their targeting systems locking onto the remaining boarding pods with deadly accuracy. Explosions rocked the station as the pods were torn apart, their occupants vaporized in a blaze of energy. Suddenly, the data storage device chimed, a soft, melodic tone that cut through the noise of battle. Lita stared at the screen, her eyes wide with disbelief. "It worked. Not fully, but I have access to a partial directory. It's something." John didn't waste any time. He dove into the directory, his fingers flying across the interface, searching for anything that could give them an edge. Finally, he found it, a schematic of the Krell warship's main reactor. "I've got it. A vulnerability, a way to take them down." Just then, the station lurched violently as the last of the shields gave way, plunging the control room into near darkness. Emergency lights flickered on, casting long, distorted shadows. "The shields are gone, John," Lita said, her voice barely a whisper. "We don't have much time left." John stared at the schematic, his mind racing. He knew that this was their only chance, but it was a long shot. "Okay, Lita," he said, his voice firm despite the fear gnawing at his insides. "Here's the plan. We hit them where it hurts," John continued, projecting a schematic of the Krell warship onto the holographic display. "The reactor core. I've analyzed the schematics from that storage device. There's a thermal exhaust port, a weak point in their shielding, but it's also right next to a heavily guarded access corridor." Lita studied the schematic, her bioluminescent markings pulsing softly. "The Krell are not fools. They anticipate such an attack." She tapped a series of commands into her console. "There is something else, a jamming signal. It is disrupting our control of the station's automated turrets." John frowned. "Jamming signal, where's it coming from?" Lita traced the signal's origin. "Within the station itself, a hidden communication device. Planted during the station's construction. It is Krell technology." A cold dread washed over John. "A mole. They planned this from the very beginning." He slammed a fist on the console. "We need those turrets back online." "The device is located deep within Sector Gamma," Lita stated, displaying a map of the station. "A highly irradiated section, structural damage from previous meteor strikes. It was sealed off years ago." John grimaced. "Great, so to regain control of our defenses, we have to go into a radioactive death trap." He looked at Lita, an unshakable focus hardening his features. "We don't have a choice." Lita nodded, already working on a solution. She retrieved a battered radiation suit from a storage locker. "This will offer some protection, but not enough." She began stripping components from her damaged Andromedan tech, integrating them into the suit. "I can enhance its shielding capabilities. A temporary measure, but it will increase your survival time." The modified suit was bulky and cumbersome, but John could feel the added layer of protection. "Thanks, Lita. Be careful." He took a deep breath and stepped towards the airlock leading to Sector Gamma. The airlock hissed open, revealing a dimly lit corridor choked with dust and debris. Warning klaxons blared, and flickering emergency lights cast long, distorted shadows. The air was thick with the metallic tang of radiation. John activated his helmet's internal sensors, the readings spiking into the danger zone almost immediately. He moved cautiously, his pulse pounding in his ears. Sporadic Krell patrols, clad in heavy armor, roamed the corridors. John used stealth and cunning to avoid them, but several times he was forced to engage in brief, brutal firefights, his pulse rifle echoing in the confined space. The Krell were relentless, their guttural roars a constant reminder of the danger he faced. Finally, he reached the Krell communication device, a sleek obsidian obelisk humming with insidious energy. He planted the explosives, setting the timer for 5 minutes. As he armed the device, the timer flickered erratically, then died completely. Damn it, he was trapped. Back in the control room, Lita watched the readings on her console, her bioluminescent patches glowing intensely. The radiation levels around John were spiking. He didn't have much time. The auxiliary systems were failing, but there is a way. She muttered, her fingers flying across the console, rerouting power from the station's auxiliary systems to the explosives. "Forgive me, John." A blinding flash erupted from Sector Gamma, followed by a concussive blast that shook the entire station. The jamming signal vanished. The explosion had done its job, but it had also destabilized the station's already failing life support systems. Alarms blared and the air grew thin. John stumbled back into the control room, his face pale and drawn, his movements sluggish. The radiation suit was scorched and smoking. "It's done," he rasped, collapsing against a console. "But the life support." Lita rushed to his side, helping him into a chair. "It is failing. We do not have much time." John coughed, his breath ragged. "Then we make it count." He looked at the schematic of the Krell warship, a plan forming in his mind. "There's one shot left. We use the escape pod." Lita frowned. "As a decoy?" "No," John said, his voice gaining strength. As a torpedo, we modify it, target that reactor weak point. Lita studied the schematic. It is possible, but the targeting systems are damaged, and we have only partial data from the storage device. We'll make it work, John insisted. We have to. Lita worked feverishly, rerouting circuits and recalibrating sensors. I can improve the targeting accuracy, but it will be a crude solution. John, despite his weakened state, began rerouting the station's remaining power to the escape pod's engines. We need speed, maximum destructive potential. As they prepared to launch, the alarms intensified. A section of the wall buckled inward, and a Krell boarding party, weapons raised, stormed into the control room. "They're here," Lita cried, grabbing a discarded plasma rifle. John, fueled by adrenaline, rose to his feet, grabbing a length of metal pipe. "Then let's give them a warm welcome." The ensuing battle was a chaotic blur of energy blasts and brutal close-quarters combat. John, despite his radiation sickness, fought with a ferocity born of desperation. He dodged and weaved, using the pipe as a club, smashing it against Krell armor. Lita, firing with deadly accuracy, took down several Krell with well-aimed shots. They fought back to back, a whirlwind of defiance against the alien invaders. Finally, after a desperate struggle, the last Krell warrior fell. But victory came at a price. Lita cried out, clutching her side. A Krell energy blast had struck her augmented organ. Her bioluminescent markings flickered and dimmed. John rushed to her side. "Lita, what is it?" "The organ, it is damaged," she gasped, her voice weak. "I require immediate intervention." John looked around the ravaged control room, the failing life support systems, and the imminent threat of the Krell warship. Time was running out. He had a choice to make. "We're out of time, Lita," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "I have to launch the escape pod." He helped her into the pilot's seine, strapping her in. The automated escape protocol initiated, setting a course for the nearest habitable planet. But John wasn't finished. Ignoring the automated sequence, he accessed the autopilot controls, setting them for manual override. "I'm not letting you go alone, Lita." He prepared to pilot the escape pod himself, knowing that their survival and perhaps the fate of Earth rested on his shoulders. The world blurred into a screaming tunnel of light and sound. John felt his body compress against the acceleration couch as the escape pod ripped away from the dying station. Every nerve ending screamed in protest, a symphony of G-forces threatening to overwhelm him. He spared a glance at Lita. Her breathing was shallow, ragged gasps that barely stirred the medical sensors clinging to her skin. The alien tech he'd jury-rigged was holding, but only just. Her color was fading, the vibrant blues of her skin turning a sickly gray. "Lita, Lita, can you hear me?" He yelled over the pod's straining engines. Silence. Then a weak cough. "John, navigation." Her voice was a bare whisper, infused with pain. He tore his attention back to the controls. The escape pod's navigation display was a shattered mess of flickering pixels and static. "Navigation's fried, Lita. Looks like I'm flying blind." He cursed, slamming a fist against the useless console. "Damn it, I can't even get a proper trajectory to the Krell warship." Lita coughed again, a wet, rattling sound. "Targeting, system, manual override, frequency modulation." He leaned closer, straining to hear her. "What was that, Lita? I need you to speak up." With visible effort, she focused her gaze on him. "Andromedan, targeting, complex, but effective. I guide you." For the next few minutes, Lita, her voice fading in and out of consciousness, guided John through the alien targeting system. Her knowledge, even fragmented, was invaluable. He translated her instructions into clumsy commands on the human interface, his fingers flying across the controls. The targeting reticule flickered erratically, a testament to the damage, but it was slowly, painstakingly, locking onto the Krell warship. As they approached the warship, a blaring alarm filled the pod. Energy surge detected. The computer shrieked. "Unknown energy field detected. Recommend immediate evasive action." John squinted at the sensor readings. A shimmering, almost invisible energy shield enveloped a section of the warship's outer hull, directly over the reactor weak point they were targeting. "Damn it," he muttered. "They knew we were coming, shields blocking our shot." "Shield. Fluctuating," Lita gasped, her voice barely audible. "Frequencies. Unstable." He watched the energy readings, his brow furrowed in concentration. The shield flickered and pulsed, its energy signature rising and falling in an unpredictable rhythm. "It's fluctuating, all right, but there's no pattern, it's completely random." Lita's hand weakly gripped his arm. "No, pattern, power, distribution, internal cycles." John's eyes widened. "Internal power cycles. You mean the shield frequency is tied to the warship's power grid?" He studied the readings again, this time focusing on the subtle fluctuations in the ship's energy output. "You're right. There is a correlation. The shield weakens during power surges." He slammed his hand on the throttle. "All right, Lita, here's the plan. We wait for a power surge, then punch through the shield and deliver our payload. It's going to be close, damn close." He knew it was a gamble, a near suicidal one. The escape pod shuddered violently as it entered a debris field surrounding the warship. Twisted metal and shattered hull fragments spun around them, remnants of previous battles. Then, a new alarm shrieked through the cockpit. "Krell fighters incoming!" John yelled, spotting two sleek, predatory ships closing in on their position. "Time to dance." He wrestled the escape pod through a series of gut-wrenching evasive maneuvers, dodging laser fire that scorched past their hull. Years spent in flight simulations were finally paying off, but this was no simulation. This was life or death. While dodging, he was simultaneously calculating the shield frequency windows. A Krell fighter scored a hit, sending a jolt through the escape pod. Alarms blared as the weapons system's display went dark. "Weapons offline," John shouted, fighting to maintain control. "Damn it, we're sitting ducks. Power, reroute." Lita gasped, her voice weaker than before. John glanced at her. Her face was pale, her breathing shallow. He knew what she was suggesting. "No, Lita, I'm not taking power from your life support." "Must stop, Krell," she insisted, her grip tightening on his arm. He hesitated, torn between his duty to protect Lita and the need to complete their mission. Every second counted. "Damn it all to hell," he muttered, flipping the power reroute switch. The escape pod shuddered as power surged to the damaged weapons system. The targeting reticule flickered back to life. He fired, a desperate, almost blind shot. The laser blast connected with one of the Krell fighters, sending it spiraling into the debris field. The second fighter exploded in a ball of fire. "We got him!" John yelled, adrenaline coursing through his veins. But his victory was short-lived. The power drain had taken its toll. Lita's life support system sputtered and died. "Lita!" He ripped off his headset, turning to her. Her eyes were closed, her chest barely rising and falling. Reaching the optimal attack position, John aligned the escape pod with the reactor weak point, preparing to fire during the next shield vulnerability window. His finger hovered over the weapon's trigger. "Wait!" Lita's eyes snapped open. Her voice, though weak, was filled with urgency. "Don't fire the surge. It's a trap." "What?" John stared at her, confusion warring with disbelief. "Krell, no, power surge, overload, vessel." He looked at the sensor readings, his blood running cold. She was right. The power surge wasn't a window of vulnerability. It was a deliberate trap, designed to overload any vessel that dared to approach. With only seconds to react, John yanked the escape pod away from the warship, narrowly avoiding a massive energy surge that would have vaporized them both. He gripped the controls, his fist clenched. They were out of time. Lita was fading fast, and the Krell had anticipated their every move. "Damn it, they're too smart for us. We need a new plan, Lita. Any ideas?" Silence. He turned to Lita. Her eyes were closed. He put two fingers on her neck, searching for a pulse. It was thready and weak, barely there. A desperate, insane plan formed in John's mind. A plan born of desperation and fueled by a reckless, almost suicidal impulse. He stared at the escape pod's damaged hull, at the flickering emergency lights, at the sparking wires and shattered consoles. An idea so crazy it just might work. He leaned closer to Lita, whispering into her ear. "Lita, I have an idea. It's insane, but it might be our only chance. We're going to turn this hunk of junk into a dirty bomb." "So we overload the reactor," John finished, his voice tight. "Vent the containment field and turn this escape pod into a dirty bomb. A localized radiation burst big enough to fry everything within a 5-kilometer radius." Lita's breathing hitched, a mechanical whirring accompanying the sound. "Indiscriminate," she managed, her voice weaker than before. "The Krell. They might have prisoners, other survivors, your people perhaps." John hesitated, his hand hovering over the reactor controls. The image of those Krell warriors flashed in his mind, but then he saw Lita's face, pale and drawn, and the phantom faces of all the others who might be caught in the crossfire. "Collateral damage," he muttered, the phrase feeling hollow even to him. "One life against. How many?" Lita's eyes flickered. Before we condemn them all," she gasped. Scan the warship for vulnerabilities, something more precise." Her hand trembled as she reached for the damaged control panel. "The Krell, they are not infallible." John stared at her, his teeth gritted. He wanted to argue, to push for the quick solution, but the look in her eyes, a desperate plea mixed with unwavering willpower, stopped him. "All right," he relented, his voice barely a whisper. "Long-range scan, but the sensors are fried, Lita. It'll be a miracle if we get anything." He initiated the scan, the escape pod groaning under the strain. Static filled the small space, punctuated by the whine of the damaged equipment. Minutes stretched into an eternity, the silence broken only by Lita's labored breathing and the hum of the failing life support systems. Then, a faint signal appeared on the screen, a blip hidden beneath layers of interference. "There," Lita whispered, pointing a shaky finger at the display. "An energy conduit. Running along the outer hull, connected to the primary weapon system." John zoomed in, his eyes widening. "Heavily shielded," he noted, "but yeah, I see it. What about it?" "Overload it," Lita said, her voice gaining a sliver of strength. "Disrupt the energy flow, disable the main weapon." "Easier said than done," John countered, frustration lacing his tone. "That conduit's got more shielding than this whole damn pod. And look, automated defense turrets. We get within range, we're toast." John studied the tactical display, his gaze drifting to the debris field surrounding the warship. Wreckage from a dozen battles floated in a chaotic dance of twisted metal and frozen corpses. An idea, reckless and desperate, sparked in his mind. "The debris field," he said slowly. "We use it for cover, get close enough to the conduit without being detected." Lita coughed, a rattling sound that sent a shiver down John's spine. "Precise maneuvering required." "Yeah," John agreed, his mind already racing. "Which means I need to modify the propulsion system, short bursts of controlled thrust. Enough to thread the needle through that mess." He grabbed a handful of wires, his fingers flying across the damaged console. "Lita, I need the technical specs for that Krell energy conduit, and the optimal frequency to disrupt its energy flow." Lita closed her eyes for a moment, gathering her strength. "Frequency. Modulated at 7-8 terahertz," she rasped. "Disruptive pulse. Amplitude 4-2. She trailed off, her breathing becoming more shallow. John didn't respond, his focus solely on the wiring in front of him. "All right," he muttered, rerouting power from the life support, amplifying the EMP emitter. Alarms blared as the escape pod shuddered. "This is gonna hurt, Lita. I'm drawing power from everything I can." Lita's eyes fluttered open. "Do it," she breathed. He rerouted the power. The lights flickered, dimming to a near twilight. Lita gasped, her body convulsing slightly. The mechanical whirring of her augmentations grew fainter, more erratic. John spared her a glance, his heart twisting with guilt. He reached out, manually adjusting the settings on her life support system, trying to compensate for the power drain. "Almost." "There," he grunted, his face slick with sweat. He glanced at Lita, then back at the console. Okay, Lita, we're ready. EMP emitters charged, ready for a suicide run. They plunged into the debris field. John gripped the controls, his fingers tightening. The escape pod bucked and weaved, dodging chunks of twisted metal and frozen bodies. The proximity alarm screamed incessantly. Thunk. A large piece of debris slammed into the escape pod, sending a jolt through the entire vessel. Sparks flew from the console. Damage report. John shouted, his voice strained. EMP emitter. Compromised, Lita managed, her voice barely audible. Range, reduced by 70%. John swore under his breath. 70%. That meant they had to get practically point blank to the conduit. Damn it, he said. We have to get closer. Too risky, Lita protested weakly. Defense. Turrets. John ignored her, pushing the escape pod to its absolute limits. He weaved through the debris field with a recklessness born of desperation, ignoring the alarms and Lita's increasingly frantic warnings. The conduit loomed closer, a heavily shielded cylinder pulsing with malevolent energy. Brace yourself, John said grimly. Firing EMP emitter. Now. He slammed his hand down on the activation switch. The escape pod shuddered as it unleashed a burst of electromagnetic energy. On the warship, a momentary power surge rippled across its surface. The lights flickered, then stabilized. John held his breath, watching the energy conduit. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the defense turrets swiveled towards them, their barrels glowing with deadly intent. It didn't work, Lita whispered, her voice filled with despair. John stared at the conduit, his mind racing. The Krell. They'd adapted. They shielded against our frequency, he yelled, his voice raw with frustration. They were ready for us. The turrets opened fire. The Krell warship's turrets spat emerald fire, each blast a searing streak against the backdrop of shattered planetoid. John wrestled with the escape pod's controls, throwing it into a wild, unpredictable spin through the debris field. Alarms blared, a cacophony of warnings that mirrored the frantic hammering of his heart. They're targeting our heat signature, he yelled over the din. Lita, her face pale and slick with a thin sheen of sweat, struggled to focus on her console. The holographic displays flickered erratically, their data corrupted by the escape pod's failing systems. I'm analyzing their energy signature, she gasped, her voice strained. Fluctuations. In their navigation system. Unstable. What kind of unstable? John barked, dodging another volley of energy bolts that vaporized a nearby chunk of rock. Inertial dampener, Lita wheezed, clutching her chest. Her breathing was becoming ragged. Compromised. They're vulnerable to sudden gravitational shifts. John's mind raced. The debris field. A chaotic jumble of asteroids and planetary fragments. Could we use the debris to create a localized gravitational anomaly? Lita's eyes widened, a spark of recognition flickering within them. Disrupt their navigation. Yes, but creating such an anomaly, it would also destabilize my life support systems further, the gravitational stress. John's eyes sharp. He glanced at Lita, her face gaunt and her movements sluggish. He knew what he had to do. The risk is worth taking. We don't have a choice. He engaged the escape pod's targeting system, highlighting the largest, most dense pieces of debris within a 50-meter radius. Give me the calculations. Precise placement. Lita, her hands trembling, began feeding him data. John, his brow furrowed in concentration, manipulated the escape pod's tractor beam, carefully positioning the debris. Each chunk of rock, some the size of small buildings, was nudged into place, creating a dense, swirling gravitational field. The escape pod groaned under the strain. The warship, caught in the anomaly's pull, began to shudder violently. The emerald fire from its turrets became erratic, spraying wildly across the debris field. Their targeting systems are failing. John shouted, a surge of adrenaline coursing through him. Suddenly, the turrets fell silent, but a low, ominous hum began to resonate through the escape pod, vibrating in John's teeth. They're charging their main weapon. Lita cried, her voice infused with terror. Can we disrupt it? John demanded, frantically scanning the warship's energy signature. Shielded, Lita gasped, coughing violently. Separate energy source. Gravitational effects. Minimal. Desperation clawed at John's throat. They were out of time. There is one possibility, Lita said, her voice barely a whisper. Overload their targeting matrix. Feed it false data. Corrupt the system. John's mind flashed back to the fragmented Krell communication codes he had deciphered earlier. Useless, he had thought, but now. The Krell codes, the partial commands, could we use them to generate false data? Lita nodded weakly. Possible. Reroute communication systems. Broadcast corrupted commands. Target their main weapon. Without hesitation, John began rerouting the escape pod's communication systems, his fingers flying across the console. He input the Krell codes, a chaotic jumble of alien syntax, and focused the broadcast on the warship's main weapon targeting matrix. The warship's bridge view screen flickered with static, displaying garbled information and nonsensical symbols. Alarms blared within the warship. The main weapon, overloaded with corrupted data, began to whine and shudder. Suddenly, with a blinding flash of energy, the weapon misfired, unleashing a raw, untamed blast that narrowly missed the escape pod but slammed into the warship's port engine nacelle. The warship lurched violently, its internal lights flickering and dying. The ominous hum of the engines faded into silence. The warship stalled, dead in the water. A garbled distress signal crackled over the comms, barely audible amidst the static. Mayday, Krell vessel, system failure, requesting assistance. Then silence. Lita looked at John, her expression conflicted. We are obligated to offer what help we can. John shook his head, his gaze fixed on the disabled warship. Obligated. They just tried to kill us, Lita. And besides, remember what you said. The Krell don't take prisoners. They'd sooner die than accept help from outsiders. As if on cue, a new contact appeared on their sensors. A much larger vessel, its energy signature dwarfing the Krell warship, decloaked nearby. Its hull was scarred and battered, filled with an array of menacing weaponry. The weapons trained on both the Krell warship and the escape pod. This was no rescue party. Unidentified vessels, this is the salvage vessel Greed's Gambit. A raspy voice crackled over the comms, dripping with avarice. Surrender your craft and all valuable technology immediately. Resistance is futile and unprofitable. The transmission targeted both the escape pod and what remained of the Krell warship. John's fingers danced across the console, pulling up the scavenger's signal profile. Standard band modulation. But look at this, he muttered, tracing a line on the holographic display. The ping delay. It's subtle, but they're broadcasting from a considerable distance. Still outside optimal weapon range. Marauder class, Lita whispered, her voice weak but tinged with a professional edge. Heavy armament, minimal shielding, cowards who prey on the weak. John's mind raced. Which means we have a window, a small one. Every second counted. The Greed's Gambit was getting closer, its predatory intent a tangible weight in the cramped escape pod. Lita coughed, a rattling, wet sound. The biomonitors flashed a dire red. My systems, failing. Her voice faded, her body slumping against the restraints. Damn it. John had to act, and fast. All right, plan B, he muttered, already rerouting power conduits in his mind. We can't outrun them, and we sure as hell can't fight them head-on. But maybe, just maybe. His gaze fell on the escape pod's tractor beam emitter. We can give them a nasty surprise. He glanced at the wreckage of the Krell warship drifting nearby. We'll use that hunk of junk as cover. His fingers flew across the console, bypassing safety interlocks, rerouting power. Tractor beam. Secondary function. EMP burst. Come on, baby, work with me. The escape pod shuddered as he forced systems beyond their design parameters. He was pushing everything to the limit, cobbling together a weapon from spare parts in desperation. Lita stirred, her eyes fluttering open. John, what doing? Making a big noise, he said, his voice tight with concentration. Hold on, this might get bumpy. Overload, systems, destroy, pod. Her warning was weak, barely audible. He ignored her, his focus absolute. Sorry, Lita, no choice. He wrestled with the controls, piloting the escape pod in a slow, deliberate arc behind the crippled Krell warship. The larger vessel offered scant protection, but it was better than nothing. John accessed the salvaged Krell comm codes, his fingers flying across the unfamiliar interface. He broadcast a garbled distress signal mimicking the Krell's guttural language. Mayday, mayday, critical damage, requesting assistance. The fake signal pulsed into the void, a desperate lure for a greedy predator. The greed's gambit took the bait. Its sensor profile shifted, angling towards the damaged warship. Krell distress signal detected, the raspy voice cackled. Jackpot, prepare boarding clamps. Now, John hissed. He fired the makeshift EMP cannon. A concentrated burst of energy, raw and untamed, erupted from the escape pod's tractor beam emitter, lancing across the void towards the scavenger ship's sensor array. The greed's gambit's sensors overloaded in a blinding flash. Targeting systems went haywire, spitting out error codes. Shields flickered, momentarily collapsing under the strain. The scavenger ship roared in fury. They're attacking. Return fire, full power. A volley of plasma bolts streaked towards the Krell warship, obliterating it in a cataclysmic explosion. The shockwave hammered the escape pod, sending it spinning violently. Alarms blared, lights flickered, and the artificial gravity wavered. The escape pod's life support system sputtered and died. The bio monitors flatlined. Lita went limp, her body weightless in the failing gravity. John fought to regain control, his vision blurring, his head swimming. The console sparked, showering him with molten plastic. He gripped the controls, squeezing hard, teeth gritted against the pain. Then a new contact. Cold, precise, deadly. Behind the escape pod, where the Krell warship used to be, space shimmered. A sleek black vessel decloaked, its weapons already locked on. The new vessel hung in the void, a stark contrast to the battered listening post, where the station was a patchwork of bolted-on repairs and jury-rigged systems. The newcomer was sleek, obsidian dark, its lines suggesting a predator poised to strike. Its arrival was heralded not by a blaring alarm, but by a subtle hum that resonated through the station's frame, a deep thrum that vibrated in John's teeth. A voice cut through the comms channel, crisp and professional. Unidentified vessel, this is the Nightingale. Identify yourselves. John cleared his throat, exhaustion clinging to his voice. This is Senior Tech Officer John Jackson, operating from Listening Post 7. We just disabled a Marauder-class scavenger ship. The response was immediate. Jackson, this is Captain Eva Rostova. We are surprised. A lone officer and an alien managed to disable a Marauder. Impressive. A hint of disbelief laced her tone. The Nightingale shimmered, resolving into sharper focus, revealing subtle sensor arrays and weapon emplacements. It was a warship, make no mistake. We detected the unique energy signature of the Andromedan escape pod, Rostova continued. We intervened to prevent the scavenger ship from acquiring advanced Andromedan technology. Stand down, Officer Jackson. We're here to assist. A ramp extended from the Nightingale, sealing against the station's exterior hatch. Moments later, a team of humans in dark tactical gear entered, weapons held at the ready before relaxing slightly. At their head was a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, Captain Rostova. Behind her, a medical officer hurried towards Lita, who was still slumped against the console, her breathing shallow. Dr. Wilson, stabilize her, Rostova ordered, her gaze sweeping over the damage to the station. She turned back to John. That scavenger ship did a number on this place, and on her. Doctor. Wilson, already working on Lita, didn't look up. She's stable for now, Captain, but she requires specialized medical care. Our capabilities are limited. He gestured to a gash on Lita's arm. This is beyond anything we can handle here. Rostova's expression hardened. Jackson, do you understand the significance of what you've done? That hostile Andromedan faction. Their research into weaponizing black holes poses a danger to the entire galaxy. John swallowed, the weight of her words settling heavily on him. Weaponizing black holes. They're close, Rostova confirmed. Very close. That's why we're here. The Nightingale is equipped with experimental cloaking technology. We operate outside of regular Starfleet channels. We can transport you and the Andromedan to a hidden human research station. They have the facilities to provide her with the necessary medical treatment. She paused, her eyes locking with John's. But understand this, Officer Jackson. Remaining with us will reveal the location of that station to the hostile Andromedans. When they discover that Lita is no longer where they thought she was, they'll widen their search. John ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. A hidden research station. That was a hell of a risk. What about Starfleet assistants? Can't you contact them? Rostova shook her head. Our mission is highly classified. We cannot risk exposing our existence to Starfleet command. The potential repercussions are significant. Lita stirred, her violet eyes fluttering open. She looked at John, her expression weak but determined. John, you must accept their offer, my research. It could save countless lives, I know the risk, but... She coughed, wincing in pain. Rostova watched them, her face unreadable. Lita's voice was barely a whisper. I trust you. John, you will make the right decision. John looked from Lita to Rostova, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He glanced around the battered station at the flickering lights and sparking wires. He thought of the scientists at the research station, working in secret, their lives hanging in the balance. He shook his head. We can't risk it. We can't risk exposing your research station to the Andromedans. Rostova raised an eyebrow, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. And what do you propose, Officer Jackson? A compromise, John said, his voice gaining conviction. The Nightingale provides us with essential medical supplies and technical schematics. We continue our journey, but in a different direction. Hopefully we can misdirect the hostile faction. Rostova was silent for a long moment, her gaze intense. That's a bold plan, Jackson, and a risky one. It's the best chance we have, John insisted, for everyone. Eva Rostova sighed, a hint of resignation in her voice. Very well, Officer Jackson, I acknowledge your logic. We will provide the requested doctor NCE. Doctor. Wilson, following Rostova's orders, worked quickly, preparing a temporary bio-augmentative patch. Based on the schematics you provided, he said to John, handing him the small device. It will temporarily stabilize her condition, but it requires frequent recalibration, every few hours at least. Rostova stepped forward, her expression grim. The hostile Andromedans will not give up easily. They will likely track Lita's energy signature across vast distances. She handed John a small, rectangular device. This is a modified sensor dampener salvaged from the scavenger ship. It can mask her energy signature. For a limited time. Use it wisely, Officer Jackson. With a final nod, Rostova turned and strode back towards the Nightingale. Her team followed and the ramp retracted. The sleek warship shimmered once more, its cloaking device activating. In a blink it was gone, leaving John and Lita alone in the vast emptiness of space. John sighed, turning his attention back to Lita. All right, let's get this patch calibrated. He began working, his fingers flying across the console, adjusting the frequency settings. Lita, despite her weakened state, was already analyzing the sensor dampener's schematics, her fingers dancing across a holographic display. There has to be a way to improve its effectiveness, she muttered, her brow furrowed in concentration. Suddenly, she gasped, her eyes widening in alarm. John, the bio-augmentative patch. It's emitting a low-level signal. It's acting as a beacon. John froze, his blood turning to ice. He looked at Lita, his heart pounding in his chest. A beacon, you mean? They've been tracking us all along, Lita confirmed, her voice trembling. And they're closing in. Fast. It's coming from the bio-augmentative patch, Lita confirmed, her fingers dancing across the holographic display. The image swam with complex waveforms pulsing with an insistent rhythm, a low-frequency tracking signal, elegant, insidious. John's brow furrowed. Can we block it? Perhaps. Lita tapped a series of commands, bringing up another schematic. There's a sensor dampener, standard issue for covert ops, but she hesitated, her expression clouding. It has a limited power cell. And the calibration. It's incredibly precise. Misalign it even slightly and it could amplify the signal instead of masking it. John swore under his breath. Great. Anything else want to go wrong? He scanned the cramped confines of the escape pod, his gaze landing on a pile of debris salvaged from Lita's wrecked vessel. Wait a minute. That power converter from your escape pod. Could that work? Lita followed his gaze. It's damaged, John. The casing is cracked, the regulators are fried. But maybe, John countered, a spark of persistence in his eyes, just maybe, we can salvage enough to give the dampener a fighting chance. The next hour was a frantic ballet of sparks and muttered curses. John, with his nimble fingers and years of experience jury-rigging ancient equipment, wrestled with the damaged converter. Lita, her face illuminated by the flickering emergency lights, guided him with precise instructions, her voice a steady counterpoint to the chaotic symphony of their efforts. The air crackled with ozone and the metallic tang of burnt circuitry. Finally, John straightened up, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. Okay, I think I've got it. A highly unstable, probably short-lived but potentially functional connection. He gestured to the jury-rigged setup, a chaotic tangle of wires and salvaged components. Lita nodded, her expression grim. Begin power-up sequence. I will calibrate the dampener. Her fingers flew across the controls, her movements precise and economical. A low hum filled the escape pod as the dampener came online. Activating, Lita announced, her voice tight with concentration. A wave of energy pulsed outwards, washing over the escape pod. Did it work? John asked, holding his breath. Lita studied the display, her brow furrowed. The signal, it flickered. Almost disappeared, but her voice trailed off, her eyes widening in alarm. They've compensated. The signal is back, stronger somehow. Damn it. John thumped his hand against the console. So the dampener only works partially. What are they doing? They are utilizing a wider spectrum of frequencies, Lita explained, her voice filled with frustration. A brute force method, but effective. They are not relying on subtlety, they are overwhelming our defenses. Suddenly, Lita gasped, her hand flying to a small panel hidden beneath the console. There's a compartment here. I had forgotten. She pried it open, revealing a small, sleek pistol. What is it? John asked, his eyes widening. A personal defense weapon, Lita replied, hefting the pistol. A disruptor pistol, powerful, but she checked the power cell. Limited charges. Can we use it? Lita's fingers danced across the weapon. I can modify it. Instead of a direct energy blast, I can configure it to emit a burst of energy that will temporarily overload their tracking system. It will buy us a window, perhaps a few precious minutes. Do it, John urged. Lita nodded, her expression determined. Activating disruptor pulse. She aimed the pistol at the console, her finger hovering over the trigger. A high-pitched whine filled the escape pod as the weapon charged. Then, with a sharp crack, a pulse of energy erupted from the pistol, washing over the console. Now. Lita yelled, change course, hard to starboard. John gripped the controls, throwing the escape pod into a violent turn. Alarms blared as the inertial dampeners struggled to compensate. Where to? There, Lita pointed to a dense cluster of asteroids on the forward display. The asteroid field, it's our only chance for cover. John gritted his teeth and steered the escape pod into the chaotic swirl of rock and ice. The ship bucked and shuddered as he navigated the treacherous terrain, dodging asteroids the size of small moons. Suddenly, a blinding flash illuminated the cockpit. An asteroid exploded nearby, showering the escape pod with debris. Alarms screamed as the navigation system went haywire. Navigation's down. John shouted, wrestling with the controls. I'm flying blind. I am rerouting power to the forward sensors, but visibility will be limited. Lita responded, her voice strained. A moment later, the pursuing Andromedan ship emerged from the asteroid field, its weapons blazing. Energy bolts tore through the darkness, vaporizing asteroids in their path. The enemy was firing indiscriminately, willing to risk everything to capture them. Another energy blast struck the escape pod, sending a jolt through the entire vessel. They disabled our engines, John yelled. We're dead in the water. Lita frantically scanned the sensors. Wait, I'm detecting something, a faint signal. Repeating, it's coming from that asteroid. She pointed to a large, dark rock looming ahead. John stared at the asteroid, his mind racing. A signal could be a trap. Or, Lita said, her voice barely a whisper, it could be our only chance. The faint hum of the jury-rigged power reroute filled the escape pod, a fragile melody of borrowed energy. That actually worked, John said, disbelief coloring his voice. Lita, still catching her breath, nodded. For now, but we both know this won't last. Remaining here guarantees capture. We have to take the risk. Her gaze locked with John's, a silent understanding passing between them. The air crackled with unspoken fears, but also with a shared persistence. All right, John said, steeling himself. Short jump to the asteroid it is. He initiated the sequence, rerouting the trickle of power to the escape pod's remaining thrusters. The pod shuddered violently as it strained against its limitations, each groan of metal a testament to John's desperate improvisation. The already dim lights flickered ominously, threatening to plunge them into darkness. With a final lurch, the escape pod broke free of the listening post's gravitational pull, embarking on its precarious journey. Minutes stretched into an eternity as they limped toward their destination. Finally, a gray, pockmarked asteroid filled the viewport, a desolate haven in the vast emptiness. They drifted closer, the signal growing stronger. Scans revealed the source, a derelict Andromedan medical facility, a tiny metal blister clinging to the asteroid's surface, dwarfed by Lita's escape pod. It looked abandoned, forgotten. Powering down thrusters, John announced, his voice tight. Brace yourself. The pod bumped against the facility's outer hull, the sound echoing through the cramped space. They were here. The airlock hissed open, revealing a narrow corridor choked with dust and debris. John led the way, his makeshift weapon held ready, Lita close behind. The facility was eerily silent, the only sound their own breathing amplified by the confined space. They reached a large, circular room, the medical bay. Equipment lay scattered and broken, wires snaking across the floor like metallic vines. A faint, rhythmic pulse emanated from a far corner. Lita moved toward the source, her face etched with a mixture of hope and apprehension. It's a beacon, she said, her voice barely a whisper. An emergency locator. She knelt beside a shattered console, her fingers tracing the contours of a damaged device. This is an organ support system, specialized Andromedan tech. Her voice trembled, but the organ, it's gone, and the system is beyond repair even with my knowledge. John frowned, his gaze sweeping over the desolate scene. What kind of facility was this? Lita hesitated, her expression clouded with a mix of sadness and vulnerability. It was for Andromedans, like me, those with specific biological dependencies on external technology. We needed specialized support to survive. Her words hung in the air, painting a picture of a life lived on the edge, reliant on machines for basic survival. John felt a surge of empathy for her, a deeper understanding of the fragility she tried so hard to conceal. Lita's gaze swept around the room, a spark of hope igniting in her eyes. This system. If I could get it working, even temporarily, it could stabilize my condition. It might be enough. John started scavenging, his boots crunching on broken glass and twisted metal. Let's see what we can find. He rummaged through overturned cabinets and sparking control panels, searching for anything usable. Anything at all. Lita, meanwhile, attempted to interface with the damaged organ support system, her fingers flying across the cracked interface. "The damage is extensive," she said, her voice filled with frustration. "I can't repair it quickly enough, but there might be a bypass, a risky one." John straightened up, holding a small, dented power cell. "Found a backup power cell. But it's not putting out the correct voltage for the system." Lita shook her head, her expression grim. "Even if we could, the system requires precise calibration. The bypass would overload without it." John racked his brain, desperately searching for a solution. Then, a memory flickered to life, the jury-rigged power converter he'd used to jump-start the escape pod. "Wait a minute," he said, a surge of adrenaline coursing through him. "Remember the converter I used on the pod? I can use it to regulate the voltage from the power cell." Lita's eyes widened. "That's incredibly risky. The converter was never designed for this. It would be extremely unstable." "I know," John said, his voice firm, "but it's all we've got." Lita looked at him, her expression a mixture of hope and fear. "You understand what this means, John. Without a stable life support system, the bio-augmentative patch will become ineffective. My augmented systems will shut down. I'll be dependent on you again. Completely." The vulnerability in her voice was a stark contrast to her usual stoicism. John met her gaze, his willpower unwavering. "Then we'll make it work, together." They worked in tandem, a dance of desperation and ingenuity. John carefully connected the salvaged power cell to the converter, his hands moving with practiced precision. Lita, her face pale but determined, prepared for the bypass procedure, her fingers poised over the damaged interface. John took a deep breath and began to adjust the converter, his eyes glued to the flickering readouts. The power output fluctuated wildly, threatening to overload the entire system. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he fought to maintain control, his hands trembling with exertion. Slowly, painstakingly, he managed to stabilize the power output, finding a narrow window of functionality. "Now!" he shouted. Lita activated the bypass. The organ support system shuddered, sparks flying from exposed wires. Then, with a final surge of energy, it flickered to life, bathing the medical bay in a soft, ethereal glow. Lita gasped, her body visibly relaxing as the system began to work its magic. A faint blue light emanated from the bio-augmentative patch on her chest, a sign that her augmented systems were stabilizing. John didn't relax. He kept his eyes glued to the converter, monitoring the power output, detecting subtle fluctuations in stability. The system was far from perfect, a precarious lifeline hanging by a thread. Suddenly, a red light flashed on the escape pod's console. Lita tensed, her hand instinctively reaching for her weapon. "The hostile Andromedan ship," she whispered. "They've stopped firing." A distorted voice crackled over the comm system, filling the medical bay with a chilling pronouncement. "Lita, this is Commander Valerius of the Andromedan Reclamation Fleet. We know you are alive and on this asteroid. We are giving you one chance to surrender peacefully. If you do not comply, we will destroy the asteroid. You have 1 hour." John and Lita exchanged a worried look, the weight of their situation crashing down on them. They had bought themselves a little time, a temporary reprieve. But their sanctuary was a prison, their lifeline agile, and the enemy was closing in. The ultimatum hung in the air, heavy as the asteroid rock around them. Lita stared at the viewscreen, the Andromedan warship a stark, predatory silhouette against the starfield. "We have no choice, John," she said, her voice barely a whisper above the hum of the failing organ support system. "I must surrender the technology. Its potential for misuse. It's too great a risk." John slammed a wrench down on the console, the clang echoing in the cramped medical bay. "As number ender, no, absolutely not. There's always a choice, Lita. We just haven't found it yet." He ran a hand through his greasy hair, his eyes scanning the cluttered space, searching for inspiration. They think we're weak, that we'll just roll over. We'll show them what humans can do. Before either could formulate a plan, a jolt ripped through the facility. Alarms blared, red lights flashing erratically. A section of the ceiling paneling buckled and fell, showering them with dust and debris. The Andromedan ship had fired a warning shot. "They're not playing," John muttered, scrambling to his feet. He checked the diagnostics panel. "Damn it, the power converter." It took a hit. "Lita, your support system." Lita's face was pale, her breathing shallow and rapid. The rhythmic pulse of the organ support system sputtered, its holographic display flickering ominously. "It's destabilizing," she gasped. "The energy flow, it's becoming erratic." Desperation tightened its grip. Lita pointed to a reinforced panel in the far wall. "There's a failsafe system, designed to destroy all sensitive technology if capture is imminent." "Destroy?" John asked, incredulous. "It initiates a massive energy surge," Lita explained, her voice strained. "It would obliterate everything within a considerable radius, including us." John's mind raced. A desperate plan began to form. He stared at the sparking, smoking power converter, then back at the failsafe panel. "Wait a minute. The converter, it's already unstable. What if we could use that? Trigger the failsafe remotely?" Lita frowned, her brow furrowed in concentration. "It would take precise calibration. The failsafe is designed for a full demolition, not a targeted strike." "I'm not talking about a full demolition," John said, his eyes gleaming with a manic intensity. "I'm talking about modifying the converter, rerouting the energy flow, focusing it into a concentrated blast, a localized overload." "It's too dangerous, John," Lita protested, her voice weak. "The converter is already critically damaged. Any modification could destabilize it further, destroying the organ support system." "Killing me." John hesitated for only a fraction of a second. "It's our only chance, Lita, trust me." He grabbed his tools and began tearing into the power converter, sparks flying as he bypassed safety protocols and rerouted circuits. "Keep an eye on that ship," he ordered, his voice tight with concentration. "Tell me if they make a move." Lita, her breathing labored, focused on the monitor. They're not firing again. They're launching boarding pods." Her voice was permeated with fear. "They're coming here, John. They want us alive." John cursed under his breath. He worked faster, his fingers flying across the damaged circuitry. He spliced wires, rerouted power conduits, and bypassed safety interlocks with reckless abandon. Finally, he connected the modified converter to the failsafe system, creating a Frankensteinian weapon of desperation. Almost there. He and Lita positioned the device near a reinforced viewport, aiming it towards the docking clamps where the Andromedan boarding pods would attach. The converter hummed and crackled, emitting a faint ozone smell. "This thing is highly unstable," John warned, wiping sweat from his brow. "It could detonate at any moment." A deafening clang reverberated through the facility. The boarding pods had attached. Alarms blared as the Andromedan boarding party breached the outer airlock, cutting through the reinforced metal with plasma torches. Then, the inner door to the medical bay buckled inward with a screech of tearing metal as they forced their way inside. John didn't hesitate. He activated the modified converter. A surge of raw energy erupted from the device, invisible to the naked eye but registering as a shimmering distortion in the air. It slammed into the Andromedan boarding party, bathing them in an electromagnetic pulse. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Andromedans' advanced weaponry sputtered and died, their energy shields collapsing. Their propulsion systems flickered and failed, sending them tumbling backward into the boarding pod in a tangle of limbs and disabled equipment. The Andromedan ship rocked violently as the feedback surged through its systems. Did it work? Lita gasped, her eyes wide with hope. John checked the view screen. The Andromedan ship was still intact, although its movements were erratic and uncontrolled. The boarding party was momentarily stunned, but they were already beginning to regroup, preparing for a second assault. Then, A high-pitched whine filled the medical bay. The modified converter began to vibrate violently, its casing glowing red-hot. "Oh shit," John muttered. "The overload. It's creating a feedback loop. This thing's about to blow. This thing's about to blow." Sparks spat from the power converter like angry insects, each crackle a countdown. The air thickened with the metallic tang of ozone, stinging John's nostrils. He ripped his gaze from the failing machine, scanning the med bay. The Andromedan boarding party, momentarily stunned by the energy burst from Lyta's weapon, were already recovering. Their sleek, black armor absorbed the flickering emergency lights, making them appear as predatory shadows reforming in the gloom. Energy weapons, far more advanced than anything John had ever seen outside a training simulation, were raised, targeting their position. The power converter groaned, a deep, resonating vibration that threatened to shake the room apart. Lyta gasped, her breathing shallow and ragged. The holographic display above her bio bed flickered erratically, mirroring the instability of her organ support system. Sweat beaded on her brow, and her normally vibrant blue skin seemed to have dulled to a sickly gray. That's when John saw them. Etched into the wall behind a dislodged medical scanner, half hidden by a tangle of wires, were a series of intricate symbols. They weren't Federation standard, nor did they resemble any Andromedan script he'd ever encountered. They looked almost architectural. "Lyta," he said, his voice tight with urgency, "do you recognize these?" He pointed to the symbols, hoping against hope. Lyta strained to focus, her eyes glazed with pain. She swallowed hard, her throat working. "Aux, auxiliary." She whispered, her voice barely audible above the crackling of the dying converter. "Power, schematic, auxiliary power, what for? Core, breach," she managed, each word an agonizing effort. "Emergency, life support, communications. A backup system designed for a catastrophic failure, but why wasn't it active? Primary. Control, destroyed," Lyta gasped. "Manual. Override, required, manual override, meaning a physical switch, a lever, something that needed to be activated by hand. A relic from a bygone era deliberately bypassed in favor of automated systems. John's kind of relic. Where? He asked, his mind already racing. "Where is it?" "Shielded. Chamber," she whispered. "Deep. Within. Medical. Deep within." Which meant navigating the wreckage, the boarding party. "It's blocked," John said, stating the obvious. "The corridor's full of debris from their warning shot, and likely crawling with hostile aliens." He glanced back at the power converter. The crackling had intensified, the smell of ozone overwhelming. Any second now. He looked at Lyta, her face pale and drawn, her life hanging by a thread. He looked at the symbols on the wall, the schematic for a system that could save her. "I have to try," he said, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. Lyta reached out, her hand weakly grasping his arm. "No," she rasped. "Too dangerous." "I don't have a choice, Lyta. This thing's going to blow any second." Ventilation. Shindatade, her grip tightening slightly. "Map. In. Memory." She closed her eyes for a moment, then her head tilted slightly. Transferred. John felt a jolt in his neural interface. A schematic of the facility's ventilation system, overlaid with a route to the shielded chamber, appeared in his augmented reality display. A rat's maze of narrow tunnels and twisting shafts. "The ventilation system?" he asked, incredulous. "You want me to crawl through the vents?" Lyta managed a weak smile. "Less direct." He hesitated for only a moment. "All right, stay with me, Lyta." He turned towards the ventilation shaft access panel, a small, unassuming grate near the floor. As he pried it open, revealing a dark, cramped space, he noticed something else. Bolted to the wall, half obscured by dust and debris, was a deactivated security drone. Its optical sensors were dark, its weapon mounts empty. An obsolete piece of technology, forgotten and abandoned. But maybe. John reached into the shaft, pulling the drone free. It was heavier than he expected, its metallic casing cold and lifeless. He ran his hand over its surface, feeling for a diagnostic port. There. He plugged his neural interface cable into the port, initiating a boot sequence. The drone's optical sensors flickered to life, bathing the shaft in a dim, red glow. Its internal systems whirred and clicked as it ran a self-diagnostic routine. "Come on, baby," John muttered, his fingers flying across his neural interface controls. "Show me what you've got." He bypassed the drone's security protocols, accessing its core programming. It was outdated, clunky, but functional. He could work with this. He uploaded a new targeting matrix, prioritizing Andromedan energy signatures. He recalibrated its weapon systems, configuring them to fire stun blasts. It wasn't lethal, but it would buy him time. "All right, little guy," he said, detaching the neural interface cable. "Time to earn your keep." He deployed the drone into the main corridor. It hovered silently for a moment, then darted forward, its optical sensors scanning for targets. A burst of energy fire erupted from the corridor as the Andromedan boarding party engaged the drone. The drone weaved and dodged, returning fire with its stun blasters. The boarding party, caught off guard, scattered for cover. "That'll keep them busy for a minute," John said, turning back to the ventilation shaft. He squeezed himself into the narrow opening, the metal grating digging into his back. He activated his helmet light, illuminating the dark, claustrophobic tunnel. He began to crawl, following the map in his augmented reality display. The air was thick with dust and grime, and the ventilation shaft seemed to shrink with every meter. He could hear the sounds of the firefight echoing from the corridor, the crackle of energy weapons, the shouts of the Andromedan boarding party. He pressed on, driven by the knowledge that Lita's life, and perhaps the fate of the entire station, depended on him. Finally, he reached the shielded chamber. The ventilation shaft opened in toin, small, cramped space, barely large enough to stand in. The walls were lined with thick metallic plating, designed to protect the chamber from electromagnetic interference. In the center of the chamber, mounted on a pedestal, was the manual override mechanism, a complex array of interlocking gears, levers, and power conduits. It looked like something out of a museum, a relic from a forgotten age. John approached the mechanism cautiously. He could see that it hadn't been used in decades. Dust and grime coated its surface, and the gears were stiff and corroded. He began to examine the mechanism, trying to understand how it worked. He could see that it required a specific sequence of steps to activate, a series of gears that needed to be turned in the correct order. He took a deep breath and began the activation sequence. He turned the first gear, feeling the resistance of the corroded metal. The gear groaned and protested, but it turned. He moved on to the next gear and the next. Each gear was more difficult to turn than the last, requiring more force and more precision. Suddenly, the mechanism jammed. A small piece of debris had lodged itself between the gears, preventing them from turning. John cursed under his breath. He needed to remove the debris, but he didn't have any tools. He would have to use his fingers. He reached into the mechanism, carefully probing for the debris. He could feel the sharp edges of the metal gears, the risk of electrocution palpable. He managed to dislodge the debris, but as he did so, his hand slipped. He felt a jolt of electricity surge through his body, his muscles spasming uncontrollably. He cried out in pain, but he didn't let go. He forced his hand back into position, determined to complete the activation sequence. He turned the final gear, feeling it lock into place with a satisfying click. A surge of power coursed through the chamber, the air crackling with energy. The lights flickered and died, plunging the chamber into darkness. Then, with a deafening roar, the auxiliary power system activated. John was thrown back against the wall, his body convulsing from the electrical discharge. He felt his consciousness fading, his vision blurring. The last thing he saw was a blinding flash of light, followed by an all-consuming darkness. His body spasmed, a final, violent shudder that rattled his teeth. The electrical fire dancing across his nervous system began to subside as the auxiliary power system stuttered, coughed, and then miraculously stabilized. A surge, a wash of something almost like cold water flooded Lita's systems. The pain, a constant companion since her crash, receded for a fleeting moment. Her optical sensors cleared, the distorted images resolving into sharp focus. She saw John, sprawled on the floor, unmoving. "John, can you hear me?" She projected, her voice thin and weak through the comms. The emergency lighting flickered to life, harsh, cold fluorescence that cast long, skeletal shadows across the medical bay. Security schematics, previously dormant, illuminated on a wall display, revealing the layout of the station's lower levels. Cramped corridors, maintenance shafts, and a network of ventilation ducts a rat's warren of potential escape routes and ambush points. The boarding party, momentarily blinded by the sudden light, quickly compensated. Their multifaceted eyes, adapted for near-total darkness, adjusted, resolving the room with unnerving speed. They moved with a fluid, predatory grace, their weapons trained on John's prone form. Lita watched them on a restored security monitor, the image grainy but clear enough to discern their movements. "John, they're coming for you, behind the med station." Her warning, amplified by the auxiliary system, crackled in his ears as he began to regain consciousness. The auxiliary power, desperate to maintain life support, began to triage its resources, diverting power from the station's limited defensive systems. The energy shields flickered and died. The automated turrets remained dormant. The station was a sitting duck. John groaned, pushing himself up onto his elbows. His head throbbed, a dull ache that resonated with the persistent hum of the auxiliary system. He glanced at the control panel, a crude, utilitarian interface with limited functionality. The full capabilities of the station's original system were locked away, inaccessible. Suddenly, a high-pitched whine filled the medical bay, a sound that seemed to bore directly into his skull. His vision blurred, his stomach churned, and a wave of nausea washed over him. The Andromedans had deployed a sonic weapon, exploiting the bay's acoustics to inflict maximum pain and disorientation. "John, sound dampeners. Recalibrate the sound dampeners." Lita's voice, though distorted by the sonic attack, cut through the pain. He fumbled for the controls, his fingers clumsy and unresponsive. With a surge of effort, Lita remotely recalibrated the medical bay's sound dampeners, creating a localized zone of relative silence around John. The throbbing in his head subsided, his vision cleared, and he could finally think. The auxiliary power source. It was unstable. He could feel it, a growing vibration in the floor beneath him. It was drawing too much power, cycling too fast. It would overload soon, taking the entire station with it. He scanned the schematics, his mind racing. They're a method to reroute the excess energy, to bleed off the pressure. But it required manual manipulation of exposed power conduits, located outside the relative safety of the medical bay. "John, no, don't leave. They've deployed sensor nets. Any movement outside this room will trigger an alarm," Lita warned, her voice filled with urgency. He glanced around the room, his eyes landing on a discarded medical scanner. An idea sparked in his mind. He activated the scanner, manipulating its holographic projector to create a shimmering, life-sized image of himself, slumped against the med station. He slipped out of the room, unnoticed, as the Andromedans focused their attention on the holographic decoy. The corridors were dark, illuminated only by the flickering emergency lights. He moved cautiously, hugging the walls, avoiding the sensor nets by crawling through maintenance shafts and squeezing through ventilation ducts. His muscles screamed in protest, his injured shoulder throbbing with each movement. He reached the power conduits, a tangled mess of wires and pipes that snaked across the ceiling. Sparks flew from damaged connections, illuminating his face with an eerie blue light. He began the rerouting process, his fingers flying across the terminals, making precise and risky adjustments. Suddenly, a beam of light sliced through the darkness. An Andromedan patrol, their weapons raised, rounded the corner. Their leader, a hulking figure with glowing red eyes, leveled a disruptor pistol at his head. He had seconds. Finish the rerouting process or flee. He slammed his hand down on the final terminal. The auxiliary system stabilized, the vibrations subsiding. But the surge of power overloaded a nearby communications array, sending out a burst signal, a desperate cry for help, into the void. The signal reached a previously undetected Andromedan vessel, cloaked in the inky blackness of deep space. It began to decloak, its massive form slowly materializing against the backdrop of distant stars. "John, another vessel, it's decloaking." Lita's voice was filled with a mixture of hope and dread. "But it's not the same design, it's different." As the vessel drew closer, it transmitted a coded message, a series of complex mathematical equations and gravitational waveforms. The design of the ship was unlike anything they had ever seen. It was not Andromedan. It was something else entirely, a species never before encountered by either human or Andromedan. Lita's hand tightened on John's arm. "They will adapt," she hissed, her voice strained. "They will find another way through." The medical bay's reinforced door, now scored with deep gouges from the Andromedan energy weapons, wouldn't hold for long. Lita focused on the coded message. "The encryption. It is unlike anything I have encountered from this galaxy. It resembles algorithms used by a pre-spaceflight civilization from a distant galaxy." Her fingers danced across her console, lines of code blurring across the screen. John racked his brain. He vaguely recalled something from the station's historical database, a forgotten corner of galactic history. "Wait, the Krill, I remember something about them. A civilization. Peaceful, technologically advanced, but they never achieved faster than light travel." He accessed the database, the screen flickering erratically as the auxiliary power system strained. Lines of text scrolled past: Krill homeworld, designation Xantus Prime, eradicated by Andromedan forces, refusal to share technology. The pieces clicked into place. They were believed to have been wiped out by the Andromedans. They refused to share their technology. A searing blast echoed from the corridor. The boarding party was through. Alarms blared, bathing the medical bay in a pulsating red light. The boarding party breached the medical bay, weapons raised, their visors glinting in the emergency lights. But the room was empty. Frustration crackled across their comms. They swept the room, their boots crunching on shattered equipment. One of them paused, running a gloved hand over the hastily repaired conduit Lita had jury-rigged. Another picked up a discarded wrench, its handle still warm from John's grip. Traces of Lita's presence and John's clumsy but effective repairs were all that remained. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently, plunging the room into near darkness before sputtering back to life. The auxiliary power system began to exhibit erratic power fluctuations, causing intermittent system failures and dimming the emergency lights. The humming of the station's life support stuttered. "The Krill," Lita said, her voice barely a whisper. "Their vessel. It may be automated." A final act of defiance sent before their destruction, carrying data, or perhaps a weapon. John glanced at the compromised communications array, its focusing crystals shattered and misaligned from their last encounter. "We need to send a distress signal. Let someone know what's happening here." It was a gamble. Alerting the hostile Andromedans was a death sentence. But remaining silent guaranteed it. Thermal sensors painted the station's layout on Lita's console. Red blips, the boarding party were closing in, methodical and relentless. "They are tracking us. We must find a place to hide." They retreated deeper into the station's labyrinthine corridors until they reached a cold storage unit, its metal door sealed tight. It was a desperate choice. Inside, the temperature plummeted. Condensation formed on the metal walls. Lita shivered, her breath misting in the frigid air. Her modified life support struggled to compensate. My systems, they are failing," she gasped, her voice weakening. Lita's condition deteriorated rapidly and she began to cough. John frantically scanned the small space. His fingers brushed against a panel hidden behind a stack of frozen nutrient blocks. He pried it open, revealing a hidden compartment containing outdated but functional environmental suits. "Jackpot," he muttered, pulling them out. They were bulky relics from a bygone era of space exploration, but they might just buy them some time. While John was examining the suits trying to decipher their archaic controls, Lita focused on her console. "I am deciphering a small portion of the Krill message," she said, her voice strained but urgent. "Coordinates. They point to a remote planet within this star system." A klaxon blared, red lights flashed. The cold storage unit's power cut off. "Emergency purge sequence initiated," a synthesized voice announced. "Cryogenic gas dispersal commencing in T-60 seconds. The room began to hiss. A cloud of white vapor billowed from the vents, rapidly filling the chamber. John swore. He ripped open one of the environmental suits, shoving it towards Lita. "Get in, now." He wrestled with the second suit, its seals stiff and unresponsive. He managed to activate one of the environmental suits, protecting himself. He worked frantically, rerouting power cables and jury-rigging a life support system for the other suit. Time was running out. He needed to buy Lita more time. He quickly modified the other to create a temporary life support system for Lita. He added insulation where he could and rerouted the oxygen supply to allow for a more concentrated dose. John and Lita, protected by the makeshift suits, escaped the cold storage unit just as the cryogenic gas filled the chamber. They stumbled out, coughing and gasping, into the relative warmth of the corridor. Behind them, the cold storage unit became a swirling vortex of ice. They reached the damaged communications array, its shattered focusing crystals glinting under the dim emergency lights. John began to work, his fingers nimble despite the bulky gloves. The array required a manual recalibration of its focusing crystals. Each crystal needed to be aligned just right, and then locked into place. As John and Arquette on the array, Lita detected the boarding party closing in. "They are almost upon us," she warned. A decision had to be made. They couldn't send a full distress call without risking immediate detection. "Transmit a truncated version of the Krill message," Lita said urgently. "Use it as a beacon." John hesitated, but he understood. A beacon might attract unwanted attention, but it also offered a chance of rescue. He reconfigured the array, inputting the truncated code. The truncated message acted as a beacon, attracting the Krill vessel to their location, but it also alerted the hostile Andromedan ship. On Lita's sensors, a second blip appeared, closing in fast. Suddenly, the Krill vessel responded to the beacon. A burst of energy slammed into the hostile Andromedan ship, disabling its cloaking device and revealing its position in space. The hostile Andromedan ship retaliated, firing a volley of energy torpedoes at the Krill vessel. The space around the listening post erupted in a blinding display of light and energy. A space battle had begun, threatening to tear the station apart. Despite the chaos, John completed the recalibration of the communications array, enabling it to transmit a full distress signal. He overrode the truncated Krill beacon, prioritizing a plea for help. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Listening Post 7. We are under attack by Andromedan forces. Request immediate assistance." The distress signal was received. A moment later, Lita's sensors went wild. A massive energy signature was approaching the system, eclipsing both the Krill and Andromedan ships. "What is that?" she breathed, her voice filled with awe and terror. Lita was able to view more of the data and saw the ship is heading to Earth and armed with a doomsday weapon of some sort. "John, the ship is heading to Earth and is armed with some sort of doomsday weapon. We have to stop it." "What kind of doomsday weapon?" John demanded, his heart hammering against his ribs. The console spat out error messages, the emergency lights casting the room in a flickering red glow. Outside, the Krill vessel danced a desperate ballet with the Andromedan warship, energy blasts painting fleeting streaks across the void. He wrestled with the comms panel, trying to lock onto the Krill's signal again. "Lita, status report, what are we dealing with?" Lita's fingers flew across her own console, her face illuminated by the alien glyphs scrolling across the screen. This isn't a ship, John, it's a living weapon, a weaponized AI, from a species long dead. After several attempts, static crackled and cleared, replaced by an alien cadence from the Krill vessel. "Unidentified life forms, this is Krill scout vessel designation. Compromised. You are in immediate danger. Krill vessel, this is John Jackson of Earth Outpost. Can you identify the approaching entity?" The alien voice, synthesized and strangely melodic, cut through the tension. "Warning, the approaching entity is designated World Ender, a self-replicating doomsday weapon designed to consume entire planets." Lita gasped, her eyes wide with horror. The Krill are correct. The World Ender was created by a species known as the Oblivion Collective. They were at war with the Andromedans ages ago. The Oblivion Collective deployed the World Ender as a last resort, the Krill AI continued. After the Andromedans sued for peace, the Oblivion Collective were wiped out by their own creation, but not before it was launched. Suddenly, a barrage of energy slammed into the listening post, rattling the structure and sending sparks flying from the damaged consoles. The Andromedan ship, fearing an alliance, was targeting the communications array. Contact with the Krill vessel was severed, replaced by a wall of static. "Damn it!" John pounded his fist on the console. "Lita, confirm what the Krill said. Is that thing heading for Earth?" Lita stared at her screen, her face pale. "Confirmed. The World Ender. It's on a direct trajectory. Earth is its target." John turned to Lita, his expression grim. "We have to do something. We have to divert that Krill vessel." "Absolutely not," Lita snapped, her voice sharp. "My research. My work is too important. We need to escape, not throw ourselves into a suicidal battle." "Are you serious?" John exploded, his voice rising. "Earth is going to be destroyed. Millions of lives are at stake, and you're worried about your research." Lita recoiled as if struck. "You don't understand my research. It's a countermeasure, a way to stop the World Ender." "Then why aren't we using it?" John demanded. "Because," Lita hesitated, her voice barely a whisper, "because the Krill vessel, it's not powerful enough. It can't change the World Ender's course." Another volley of fire rocked the station, and the lights flickered ominously. A warning klaxon blared, signaling critical damage to the Krill vessel. Then a voice crackled over the comms, weaker but still clear. "Unidentified life forms. Our vessel is critically damaged. Maneuvering capabilities offline. We offer our remaining energy reserves to augment your systems, perhaps a chance." John looked at Lita, his eyes pleading. "This is it. This is our only chance." Lita shook her head, her face a mask of fear. "No, John, you don't know what you're doing. The energy, it's not compatible. It will overload the systems." "I don't care," John yelled, his voice filled with desperation. He reached for the override controls, his hand trembling. "We have to try." Ignoring Lita's frantic protests, John initiated the energy transfer. The station groaned under the strain, lights exploding in showers of sparks. The consoles flickered wildly, displaying garbled data. A wave of heat washed over them, the air thick with the smell of burning circuits. And then, for a fleeting moment, a hidden experimental long-range communication array, long dormant and forgotten, sputtered to life. John seized the opportunity, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He transmitted a coded message, a desperate plea sent across the vast gulf of space. "Earth, this is Earth listening post. World Ender inbound. Krill data available. Prepare countermeasures." As the last of the energy surged through the system, the array died, plunging the station into darkness. But then, something unexpected happened. On the main view screen, the approaching World Ender, a swirling vortex of dark energy, suddenly decelerated as it reached the edge of the solar system. It seemed to have detected the transmission, altering its targeting parameters. The station groaned, metal protesting against stresses no structure should endure. Emergency lights strobed, painting the chaos in alternating slices of red and sickly yellow. Alarms blared, a cacophony that vibrated through John's bones. The air hung thick with the acrid tang of ozone and burning circuits. The floor vibrated with each failing system, threatening to shake apart. John wrestled with a sparking control panel, his squeezing hard as he forced a manual override. Wires, stripped of their insulation, spat blue arcs of electricity. He swore under his breath, splicing a bypass circuit with a piece of scavenged cable. "Damn it all to hell," he muttered, the taste of copper and desperation thick on his tongue. Lita stormed into the control room, her bioluminescent markings flaring with anger. "What have you done?" she shrieked, her voice amplified by the station's failing comm system. "You reckless human, you've overloaded the system. You've destroyed my only means of escape." Suddenly, the scene dissolved. It was a sterile, brightly lit war room. Holographic displays shimmered with complex data streams. A dozen figures, a mix of scientists in lab coats and military strategists in crisp uniforms, leaned over a massive table displaying a three-dimensional projection of the galaxy. "The Krill language is confirmed," a woman in a lab coat announced, her voice tight with urgency. "Jackson's coded message is a warning. The Andromedans call it the World Ender. It consumes entire star systems." A grizzled general pointed to the holographic projection. "Then we prepare for war. Initiate Project Black Curtain." The galaxy faded, replaced by a schematic of Earth's defenses. Cloaked ships, invisible to conventional sensors, patrolled the outer reaches of the solar system. Planetary shields shimmered into existence, deflecting incoming energy blasts. A network of EMP cannons, strategically positioned across the globe, stood ready to cripple any invading force. Humanity was bracing for the storm. Back on the station, the alarms intensified. A low, guttural hum resonated through the structure, growing in intensity. The station's sensors flickered erratically, struggling to process the incoming data. "What is that?" John asked, his voice strained. Lita stared at a monitor, her eyes wide with horror. "The World Ender," she whispered. "It's emitting a dampening field. It's interfering with our sensors, disrupting our communications." The screens filled with static, the station's connection to the outside world dissolving into nothing. John watched another screen, his face grim. "It's decelerating," he said, pointing to the trajectory plot. "It detected your research data within the signal I sent, Lita. It's changed course. It's coming for us." He turned to Lita, his expression resolute. "We have to destroy the listening post. We can't let that technology fall into the World Ender's grasp." Lita recoiled, her eyes flashing with defiance. "No, my research. It's too valuable. It could still be used to defeat the World Ender." John stepped closer, his voice firm but pleading. "Lita, there's no time. It's the only way to protect it." "I forbid it," Lita screamed. John took a deep breath. The weight of command settled upon his shoulders. He strode to the central console and began inputting the self-destruct sequence. "I'm sorry, Lita," he said, his voice devoid of emotion, "but I can't let this happen." Lita lunged at him, her movements surprisingly swift. She clawed at the console, trying to disable the self-destruct mechanism. "You can't do this," she shrieked, her voice raw with desperation. John grabbed her wrists, struggling to restrain her. "It's for the best, Lita. You have to trust me." A warning klaxon blared. On the main view screen, a crippled Krill vessel, its hull breached and sparking, accelerated towards the approaching Andromedan ship. "The Krill!" John exclaimed. The Krill AI's synthesized voice crackled over the comm system, distorted but clear. "Human, John Jackson, thank you for your courage. We offer tactical data, the World Ender, vulnerable to focused sonic resonance at its core." Then silence. The Krill vessel slammed into the Andromedan ship, a blinding flash erupting across the void. The listening post shuddered violently. John, breathing heavily, tightened his grip on Lita's wrists. "It's too late," he said. "We have to go." He dragged her towards the escape pods, the self-destruct countdown echoing in their ears. Lita, her face streaked with tears, finally relented. "All right," she gasped. "All right, I'll help you." They reached the escape pod bay. John frantically checked the status of each pod. "Damn it," he cursed, "the energy transfer. It damaged the pods, only one is operational." He turned to Lita, his face etched with a mixture of sorrow and drive. "You have to go, Lita. I'll send you away with your research. You're the only one who can stop the world ender." Lita stared at him, her expression unreadable. "I won't leave you, John," she said, her voice firm. "Humanity's ingenuity. It's now critical to my success. I need you." John paused, surprised. He ran his hand along the inner wall of the operational escape pod. His fingers brushed against something unexpected. He pressed, and a hidden compartment slid open, revealing a single, ancient Andromedan device. It was a phase shift generator, its surface covered in intricate glyphs. The Andromedan phase shift device screamed, bathing the listening post in blinding light as John initiated the teleportation sequence. The station around them buckled, metal groaning in protest as the energy surged. A split second later, a shockwave ripped through the structure, tearing it apart in a silent, chaotic ballet of exploding circuits and vaporized steel. But the phase shift faltered. The energy surge, far greater than anticipated, corrupted the delicate teleportation matrix. Instead of a clean jump to the designated coordinates, a distorted tunnel of warped space and time materialized around them. Colors bled into each other, gravity twisted, and the very fabric of reality seemed to unravel. John felt his stomach lurch as the familiar laws of physics dissolved into an incomprehensible soup. Then, as abruptly as it began, the chaos ceased. The swirling vortex vanished, and they found themselves in utter darkness. A darkness so profound it felt like a physical weight pressing down on them from all sides. John's breath hitched. Where were they? Slowly, his eyes adjusted. Shapes began to tenacity themselves from the gloom. Massive, impossibly large structures loomed around them, crisscrossed by pulsating energy conduits that throbbed with an alien rhythm. The air vibrated with the hum of colossal machinery, a deep, resonant drone that seemed to penetrate his very bones. Where are we?" he stammered, his voice barely a whisper in the cavernous space. Lita's voice, though equally hushed, held a note of chilling realization. "We are inside it." He followed her gaze, his eyes widening in horror as he finally understood. They were inside the world ender, not near it, not orbiting it inside. Surrounded by its biomechanical innards, a labyrinth of pulsating energy, alien machinery, and unknowable purpose. Lita, her face illuminated by the faint glow emanating from the conduits, frantically worked her console. The Krill data, it's resonating with the core systems. This isn't a weapon, John, it's a terraforming device, a damaged one, gone haywire, reacting to incorrect original programming. Hope, fragile but insistent, flickered within John's chest. A terraforming device, not a weapon of mass destruction, but a tool twisted to a destructive purpose. Maybe they could fix it. Lita pointed to a specific set of coordinates on her display derived from the Krill data. There. A specific access port to the world ender's core programming, a slim chance to rewrite its directives. Slim was an understatement. The air crackled with uncontrolled energy. The machinery around them pulsed with a malevolent intensity, but it was their only chance. "All right," John said, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. "Let's do it." Working side by side, John, drawing upon every ounce of his technical expertise, began to interface with the world ender's core. Lita provided the Andromedan interface tools, her knowledge of the alien technology proving invaluable. The system fought back, corrupted code writhing like digital serpents, attempting to block their every move. Alarms blared, the energy conduits flared, and the very air seemed to thicken with hostile intent. Suddenly, a searing blast of energy erupted from a nearby conduit, arcing directly towards John. He barely had time to react, but Lita did. With a speed he wouldn't have thought possible, she threw herself in front of him, shielding him from the brunt of the blast. The energy slammed into her, throwing her back against a wall. She cried out, a sharp, ragged sound that tore at John's heart. "Lita!" he shouted, scrambling to her side. "Finish it, John," she gasped, her voice weak but resolute. "You have to finish it." He looked at her, her face pale, her body trembling. He saw not just an alien but a friend, a partner, someone who had placed her life in his hands. He couldn't fail her. Turning back to the console, John poured all his focus, all his energy, into the task at hand. He uploaded the modified Krill program, designed to restore the World Ender's original terraforming directive. The battle against the corrupted code intensified, a desperate struggle for control of the machine's very soul. Then, slowly, painstakingly, the tide began to turn. The corrupted code flickered, sputtered, and finally began to recede. The destructive energy signature that had permeated the chamber began to fade, replaced by a calmer, more harmonious resonance. The World Ender's internal system stabilized, the alarms silenced, the pulsating energy conduits dimmed to a gentle, rhythmic glow. The machine was healing. As the last vestiges of corrupted code dissolved, a section of the World Ender's outer hull shimmered and reformed, creating a small, rudimentary escape pod. "We need to go," Lita said, her voice still weak but regaining strength. "It's starting its new mission." John helped her into the pod, his heart filled with a mixture of relief and awe. They launched, the small craft gliding silently away from the now dormant World Ender. As they cleared the massive structure, they turned to watch. The World Ender, no longer a harbinger of destruction, began to repair the damage it had inflicted on the surrounding planets. Barren landscapes bloomed with vegetation. Toxic atmospheres cleared. Dead worlds began to live again. Hope. They had brought hope to a dead sector of space. Suddenly, a series of energy signatures blipped onto their sensors, Andromedan ships. They had detected the altered energy signature of the World Ender and were approaching cautiously. "This is it," Lita said, a hint of nervousness in her voice. She activated the comm system, hailing the approaching fleet. "This is Lita of Andromeda. I have proof of the World Ender's reprogramming, and evidence of humanity's role in saving countless lives." The transmission went silent for a long moment. Then, a voice, crisp and authoritative, responded. "Lita, we thought you were lost." "What is the meaning of this transmission?" Lita took a deep breath. "I will explain everything, but first you must understand what humanity has accomplished." Moments later, John and Lita stood side by side on the bridge of an Andromedan vessel. The bridge crew, initially wary, now watched them with a mixture of curiosity and respect. Outside, the galaxy stretched before them, a canvas of endless possibilities. Lita turned to John, a genuine smile gracing her lips. "We did it," she said. "We actually did it." John returned her smile, his heart swelling with pride. He had started as a forgotten tech officer in a remote listening post. Now he stood on the bridge of an Andromedan warship, a hero who had helped save countless lives. He looked out at the galaxy, knowing that their alliance had changed everything. The barriers between species had crumbled. Trust had been forged in the fires of adversity, and there was so much work to do, so many worlds to heal,